Okay, let's take a look at how we're going to deal with dates. Now that we've got a date picker that uses JavaScript dates objects, we want to be consistent everywhere in our application. We don't want some dates being strings and some dates being objects. We want everything to be the same. So what we'll do is we'll head back to VS Code and let's just clean things up at the top. And I'm just going to open up the activity store. Now, when we receive our activities from our API, we're setting the dates at the moment and we're splitting it based on the T so that we can display the dates in a HTML input. But what we're going to do now is when we get the date back from the API, we're actually going to set it to a JavaScript dates object. And we've got the set activity. And instead of splitting the date here, what we're going to do is we're going to specify that the activity date is a new date, and then we're going to pass in the activity.date. And of course we get an error here, and the reason this is that we have an activity type, and it's telling us that the type date is not assignable to type string, which is fine. And what we can do to resolve this is go to our activity.ts file. And instead of our date being a string, we're going to specifically set this to a date. And if we go back to our activity store, then we can see that that warning has now gone away. Now we're going to have a few other errors inside here, and if we just scroll up to where we're both sorting our activities and then using the reduce function to return a grouped set of activities, then we need to make some changes here. Because the date pass will only take a string, and now our dates are actual date objects, we of course need to change this method. So what we'll do is we'll remove the date pass and we'll specify that the dates, and we'll say dates.getTime, which is a method that we have available on date objects, and we'll do the same for the second one here. And we'll specify v.date and then getTime, and that resolves that particular error. Now what we need to do for the second one, in the grouped activities, we do actually want this to be a string, because that's what we're using as the group name for each set of activities on a particular date. So what we'll do is we'll specify our activity.date, and then we'll say to isostring, and then we'll use split, and we'll split it from the T, and then we'll get the first element of the array from that split, and that resolves that particular problem as well. Now we're still going to have another problem to resolve in our code, and if we go to the activity form, then we can see that we've got an error highlighted here. And the reason for this is that inside our initial values, we're setting the date as a string. Now a string cannot be a date object, of course. And if we take a look at the actual error, then where we're setting the activity, it's telling us that type date is not assignable to type string, of course. So what are our options here? Well, we can try using null instead of the string. And this gives us a different kind of problem. And it tells us that date is not assignable to type null. Aha, okay. Well, alternatively, what we could do is specify date as a new date object. And this resolves the problem, but it's going to initialize our form effectively with a new date set to the current date. And that's not ideal either. So our alternative, and the approach that we're going to take, is we are going to set our date to be null. But this also means that we need to allow our date to be set as null. And the way that we can do that, of course, is to go to our activity interface and give the date a type of date or null. However, we fix one problem, we create several others, because now, if we take a look at the errors that we've now got in our application, we've got all of these null checks going on in our code inside our activity store saying that the date could possibly be null. So what we'll do is a compromise. We'll keep this in place as it is because technically this is correct. We want our date either to be a date object or we want it to be null. But if we take a look at our activity store, now all of these different dates could possibly be null. Now we're going to say that as developers we know better and they can't possibly be null when these are being accessed. So what we'll use is the bang operator, the exclamation mark in all of these locations to get around this particular problem. And if we scroll down to where we're setting the activity, again, we'll use it here as well. And we've got one more problem somewhere, and that's in our set activity, and it's telling us that the type date is not assignable to type null. But what we need to do here to get around this is if we scroll up to where we're seeing use state, we never actually gave this a particular type, and what we need to do is specify that this is going to be a type of activity, and then it's going to respect what we did inside our activity interface here. And if we scroll down, then all of our problems have now gone away. Or have they? Well, we've now got a consistent date strategy, but if we go and take a look at our application, and let's go back to the home page first of all, which of course is going to work. But then we go to the activities. Well, now we've got a whole new kind of problem. And it tells us that objects are not valid as React children. And it's effectively telling us that, hey, I've got this object here, but you've asked me to display this inside an HTML element, which I'm expecting to be a string. So what we'll do next is take a look at how we can get around this kind of problem.